A couple of weeks ago, I got this comment asking me to react to the world's longest piece. And of course, I have heard about this piece. It's currently being played in Germany on an organ. Now, this comment suggests that the piece actually lasts 18 hours. And I thought it lasted about 16 years, which is quite the difference. So obviously, I had to look into it. The piece is a piece of music by John Cage, and it's called ASLSP, or As Slow as Possible. And a piano version of this piece usually lasts about 70 minutes, which is not really that long. There are symphonies that last 70 minutes, and normally a solo piano recital might last about an hour or 70 minutes. And although that would usually be made up by lots of different pieces, 70 minutes doesn't feel that long for the world's longest piece. But the original organ version of this piece was written by John Cage in the 80s, and a performance of this piece began being played in 2001 and is due to last 639 years. That would mean that the piece that is currently being played and started in 2001 won't finish being played until 2640, which means obviously there will be no one around to listen to the entire piece being played, which begs the question, what's the point? And also, why 639 years specifically? Well, John Cage actually died in the 90s, and I don't think he decided that it was going to be 639 years long. I think that's just an interpretation of the piece because it just says as slow as possible. And a normal piano version of this piece is usually around 69 beats per minute. So I can imagine that this organ variation of the piece is probably like 0.00001 beats per minute. And the interesting thing about this piece is because it's going so slowly, every time a note changes, it's quite the event. And people gathered in 2020 to hear the note being changed, which is bizarre. But this got me thinking, if that's the world's longest piece and it's going to last 639 years, what is the world's shortest piece of music? Well, the shortest piece of music to ever have been written is a piece of music by Napalm Death, and it's called You Suffer, and it lasts exactly 1.316 seconds. That means that that piece is so short that I can actually play you the entirety of that song without getting copyrighted. Just in case you missed it. Now, the interesting thing about this particular song is two things. One, I have no idea what's been said or what's going on in the 1 second. But also, I couldn't find any discernible reason as to why it lasts only 1.316 seconds. Usually, when a piece is either really short or really long like that, there is a reason, and it's designed to be that way. But maybe they just wanted the world record for being the shortest song. But then I thought, what else is there? Is there a world's loudest piece, or is there a world's quietest piece? Well, the world's quietest piece I don't think will shock anyone in the fact that it's completely silent, and a lot of people already know this piece of music. It's called 433, and it's also by John Cage. John Cage was an experimental composer, so obviously he was writing a load of weird music. And this piece actually does have a concept, and the concept is that there is no such thing as silence. Whenever this piece is being performed, the idea is that even though there's no actual, I suppose, music happening, listening to the audience shuffle around and, you know, the sound of fans in a hall, the piece is kind of there to prove that there is never such a thing as silence. And the question that I have, and I think most people have when they hear about this piece, is why is it 4 minutes and 33 seconds long exactly? Now, I originally thought that it had something to do with the fact that 4 minutes 33 means something, and it's something to do with a vacuum, or there's some number around 433, or the length of each movement, that makes the number 4 minutes 33 make sense. However, when digging around to find out, I found that 4 minutes 33 is actually 273 seconds, and minus 273 degrees is absolute zero in Celsius. And that has absolutely nothing to do with emptiness or a vacuum or anything like that. It's actually got nothing to do with silence. So it seems kind of pointless. And I also couldn't find out if that was the actual reason that it is 4 minutes and 33, or is that just speculation? The conclusion that I came to is that I think the first ever performance of this concept was performed in 3 movements and accidentally lasted 4 minutes and 33. so that's why it's stuck. But if you have a more definitive reason as to why it's 4 minutes 33, then let me know in the comments. Having found the quietest piece, I thought, well, there can't really be a loudest piece because surely you can just turn up the volume. If I wanted to make a piece really loud, the limit for how loud is determined by how it's played or how someone interprets it. It's not really about how it's written. So it's really impossible to write the loudest piece. But there are an awful lot of weird pieces, especially in the 20th century when music was being experimented with. And looking at all these pieces kind of did send me on a deep dive of looking at crazy pieces of music. And I thought if John Cage's 433 had a weird concept, maybe there's lots more pieces with even more weird concepts. And the first piece that came to mind is a piece that I studied actually a long time ago, and that's Stockhausen's Helicopter Quartet. So as you can probably tell, there is a string quartet and each of them are in a different helicopter flying sort of next to each other. And the idea is that these string players have to imitate the helicopter's sound. And you may ask why? And the answer is, I don't know. I can imagine the thought process behind this piece was, well, a violin can play pretty fast and that kind of sounds like a helicopter, so why not spend loads of money paying for helicopters? Now, concepts like this have pushed music forward, and Stockhausen was a big pioneer in music technology and brought it up to where it is now. So although this piece is quite weird and I can't really understand why you would want to play it, I think pieces like this have to exist in order to just test the extremes. And I've toyed with this idea as to what is music? Does it have to be melodic? Does it have to be rhythmic? Does it have to make musical sense? Or can it just be noise art? And I don't know, I suppose every form of art has an extreme version of that art. And while I was watching this, I thought, how would you notate this piece of music? And are there pieces that just have incredibly difficult notation to read? And I remembered contemporary music class while I was at music college, and Brian Fernyhough came up quite a lot because he is a contemporary composer that plays with these kind of things and he's still living. So I looked into it and I came across his string quartet number 2, which looks like this. And it's pretty crazy to look at. It's very hard to understand what's actually going on. But I suppose listening to it, it makes more sense when you're following the music. The difficulty is, what happens if you were the first to read this, or you're reading this without listening to it? It would just take you such a long time to learn. Now that opening is all on one violin. There's a lot of triple stopping or multiple notes at the same time on the violin, and counting it is incredibly difficult. It's still very possible to read and understand if you just take a lot of time learning it. But are there pieces out there that are more interpretive, where it requires interpretation to understand it? And I came across this piece, which is by Tom Johnson, and it's called Syncopated Textures. Now, looking at this, I have absolutely no idea how you would go about interpreting this. And funnily enough, there are no recordings of it. So what do we do with this page of joined up notes? And even more strange than that, there's a piece by someone called Schnebel called Mo No, or M-O-N-O, I'm not quite sure. And this is the piece of music for that. And once again, I couldn't find any recordings of this piece of music. So it's very hard to understand how this is interpreted as well. I suppose with both of these pieces, the idea is that there is no one set way of playing it. You can just play however you want to and try and find the pattern in the sheet of paper yourself. But then I have a hard time thinking, well, two players could play that completely differently and still call it the same piece. But to me, would that be the same piece? And I'm not really sure that it would be. Let me know if you know any particularly weird or odd pieces. And if you want to check out the most difficult piano pieces to play, then check out this video and I will see you there.